guys, it's Ashley, and today it's time for a review. Today's subject is Names of God by Nathan Stone. I had to read this book for class this year as part of my Theology 1 course, and I actually ended up enjoying this book way more than I expected to. So with a title like Names of God, I had no idea what to expect other than Names of God, but I wasn't sure if it was just going to be like a list of all the names of God, or like, I didn't understand what it was going to be. I knew it would be easy to fly through because look at how tiny it is. Also, it's really short and compact too, but it's like 100, I think it's actually 188 pages, but it doesn't feel like it because they're short pages. What this book actually is a discussion on the 12 original Hebrew names of God used in the Old Testament. So he goes through the names of God, starting with Elohim, moving on to Jehovah and Adonai, all of the other Jehovah compounds, I think is what Jehovah compounds, such as Jehovah Nissi, Jehovah Rapha, all of those. And it was just so well done. So for each chapter, he focuses on one of the original Hebrew names. He discusses when it first appeared in the Old Testament, the first usage of it, how many times it was used in the Old Testament, how the Hebrew people would have understood that name of God, how they would have related to it, the significance of it, and all of that kind of thing. I just found it to be really interesting how the different names wove together. And I really appreciated the point that he made that each name of God was revealed to the Hebrew people after they had already learned something about him. So, for example, they had to learn that God was their provider before they could learn that God was their healer. It was just a progression of their understanding of who God was, that it wasn't a new God, it was a new facet of who he is. One of the other key points that he makes that I really enjoyed was how every name of God in the Old Testament was a foreshadowing or a promise that was then fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. It was really cool to see how that played out because reading it as a modern day Christian, you're seeing these connections, how even down in a lot of cases to the root of the word, they were telling about Jesus' coming. For example, there's a couple names that are used only to speak of the God of Israel because they speak of plurality and the Trinity of God, even though Jesus hadn't come on the scene yet. We were still awaiting the Messiah, but he was still there and he was still evident in the name. You know, obviously in power and in function, but also down to the very name. He was still there, and I just liked seeing that. As far as a critique of this book, the things that I didn't like, they were very few and far between and had nothing to do with the actual content. One of the things that really got on my nerves was the recap at the beginning of each chapter. So each chapter in this book is only 17 pages. And again, it's a tiny little square book, so 17 pages is nothing. Yeah, there's a lot of information and a lot of stuff in there, but really even reading very closely and taking notes, it takes like no time at all to fly through a chapter. Yet every chapter begins with a summary of all of the other names that you have already discussed up to this point. I think it's because this book started off as a radio broadcast. Nathan Stone had a radio show, and so he dedicated, I think it was probably like once a week or whatever, to this topic, and each name of God was actually a show. So there would have been at least a week or more in between each episode. And so when it carried over to this book form, they just included it there. But it was really unnecessary because unless you're reading a chapter and putting it down for an extended period of time, you're not going to forget. They're short enough that it's not a problem. Along that same line, I felt like some of the chapters were just too long. Even though it was only 17 pages, I felt like they were dragging on, like he was just repeating material, restating things that he'd already stated earlier in the chapter that didn't need to be restated. It was just kind of dragging and getting on my nerves. And I think again that goes back to it being a radio broadcast originally, and he was probably having to fill in a certain amount of time on the air. But really, those are my only complaints. As far as this subject goes, it was fantastic. It was very, very, very well thought out, very well researched. Nathan Stone grew up as an Orthodox Jew. He also became a Christian early in life, and so he was uniquely qualified to write this book because he had the best of both worlds, of growing up in Hebrew education and then going on to Bible college. And he spent many years researching for this resource, and so it's very well thought out, very well researched. This is absolutely going on my shelf, absolutely going to be referenced anytime I'm speaking on Names of God. This book got 4.5 stars from me. Those two little issues that I mentioned were enough just to knock off like half a star, but really not much at all. This book was just absolutely fantastic, and I love that it was really short. It was really easy to understand. It wasn't just like, here's a bunch of theology for you. It really helped you understand what he was talking about. Lots of examples, lots of stories, lots of verses mixed into it. I cannot cannot say enough good things about it. If you're interested in knowing about the names of God, go to this book. It was a great resource, and it was only like $8 or something like that on Amazon. So if you've read Names of God, I would love to hear your opinions. If you've read a similar book on the names of God and you enjoyed it, please let me know down below what it was so I could check it out. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you later. Bye!